The team of scientists sweeping the depths of Loch Ness said tonight they'd made sonar contact with a large unidentified object. They described it as of unusual.
Scotland is a place where tartan is a fashion staple, people toss tree trunks for fun, and ground-up sheep innards are a culinary specialty.
Folks.
Also, they call lakes lochs. When it comes to lochs, Scotland has plenty, so many that no one has counted them all, though it's estimated there are over 30,000, from tiny lochs to massive ones like Loch Lomond. So it's no surprise that a land filled with large, mysterious bodies of water has plenty of stories about water-dwelling creatures. Consider the kelpie, for instance, a shape-shifting, horse-like creature that lures unsuspecting people onto its back before plunging into the water to drown them. Then there are the blue men of Minch, wicked mermen lurking in underwater caves, waiting to overturn passing boats. However, one Scottish legend stands above the rest. That would be the Loch Ness Monster, a creature as closely linked to Scotland as bagpipes, haggis, and kilts. So, how did the Loch Ness Monster become the ultimate icon of Scottish folklore? Well, it all started with a hippopotamus, a surgeon, and a toy submarine, but more on that later. When it comes to hiding spots, Loch Ness has a lot to offer a monster.
Oh my God! Did you see that?
For starters, the water is almost entirely black due to high peat content, and it's incredibly deep. It's so deep, in fact, that if the Great Pyramid of Giza sat at its deepest point with the Statue of Liberty on top, only her torch would reach above the surface. And if that doesn't impress you, Loch Ness holds about 7.5 million cubic meters of water, more than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. That's a lot of space for a creature to keep out of sight. Reports of Nessie began to surface toward the end of the 19th century, but some believe the legend stretches back to the Picts, a group of tribes who lived across Scotland during the early Middle Ages. Though the Romans labeled them as savages, the Picts were fairly cultured, and when they weren't involved in the occasional skirmish, they enjoyed carving images of the flowers and animals around them. One of these carvings, known as the Pictish beast, seems to show an aquatic creature of some sort. But what exactly? Some think it's a porpoise or a dolphin. Others have even suggested a swimming elephant. But with its elongated neck and what look like flippers, it does seem to resemble a certain loch-dwelling creature. Of course, it's probably just a coincidence, but it's a strange one if so. And this isn't the only possible evidence of an unidentified aquatic creature near Loch Ness in the Middle Ages. A biography of St. Columba, written in 565 AD, recounts an incident where the saint encountered a mysterious water beast that had recently attacked a local villager. It's worth noting this event occurred in the River Ness, not Loch Ness itself. But River Ness Monster doesn't quite have the same ring to it, does it? Despite the Pictish carvings and St. Columba's encounter at the River Ness, it wasn't until a sighting in 1933 that most people seriously began to consider the idea of a monster living in that distant loch. And interestingly, this sighting actually happened on land. As George Spicer and his wife drove by the loch one evening, they were stunned by what they called the most extraordinary form of animal crossing the road ahead. The creature reportedly had a large body and a long wavy neck. As they approached, George noticed it seemed to be carrying what looked like the carcass of a lamb in its mouth. After news of the sighting made it into the press, people started flocking to the loch, hoping for their own glimpse of the monster. Reports of sightings began to multiply, and soon enough, Nessie fever was sweeping the country. Determined to get the story of a lifetime, the Daily Mail enlisted a well-known big-game hunter named Marmaduke Wetherell to head to Loch Ness and track down the mysterious creature. At first, it looked like Wetherell was on the right track. Just a few days into the search, he discovered strange footprints along the loch's banks. He claimed they were from a powerful, soft-footed creature around 20 feet in length. Wetherell made casts of the prints and sent them to the Natural History Museum for analysis. However, when the museum finally released their findings, the result was disappointing. The footprint didn't belong to the Loch Ness monster, but to a much more common animal, a hippopotamus. Of course, while hippos are not uncommon, they're hardly a typical sight in Scotland. So, how did this particular specimen end up so far from home? The answer, unfortunately, isn't as exciting as one might hope and is actually somewhat grim. The footprints had been created using a hippo foot ashtray, literally a hippo's severed foot with an ashtray on top. It's not the kind of item you'd expect to see in stores today, but back then it was all the rage. Wetherell's reputation took a serious hit. It's unclear if he planted the prints himself or fell victim to a prank, but either way, it didn't look good for him. The Nessie excitement faded, and reigniting public interest would require something spectacular, like someone capturing an actual photo of a creature in Loch Ness. And as luck would have it, that's what happened next. The following year, a surgeon named Robert Kenneth Wilson was by the loch, possibly reflecting on whatever surgeons think about on their days off, when he noticed a mysterious creature's head emerging from the water. Luckily, Wilson had his camera ready. The image he took would come to be known as the surgeon's photograph, and it remains the most famous Nessie photo ever taken. Though it lacks the detail we expect today, many believed in its authenticity. This was a time before Photoshop and CGI, when people trusted what they saw on film. For many, the surgeon's photograph was undeniable evidence of a monster in Loch Ness. Now that it seemed there might be some truth to the many sightings, some began speculating about the type of creature the Loch Ness monster could be. The leading theory was that Nessie was a descendant of Plesiosaurs, thought to have survived the KT extinction that wiped out dinosaurs 66 million years ago and adapted to life in the waters of Scotland. The idea that a creature believed to be extinct for millions of years could still be alive may seem absurd, but it has happened before. Scientists knew about coelacanths, a type of fish presumed extinct since the Cretaceous period, only through fossils dating back 410 million years. Then, in 1938, someone spotted one swimming off the coast of Africa. So, with that example in mind, could a plesiosaur actually be hiding in Loch Ness? The realistic, if slightly disappointing answer is probably not. For years, scientists thought plesiosaurs couldn't survive in Loch Ness because they were assumed to be cold-blooded and would need warmer water to thrive. Scottish lochs have many qualities, but warm waters are not one of them. However, recent studies suggest plesiosaurs may have been warm-blooded, overturning that particular argument. Unfortunately, this doesn't make the plesiosaur theory any more plausible. To survive for 66 million years, a sizable population of these creatures would need to exist. It would be challenging for a large group of giant reptiles to stay hidden in Loch Ness without being detected by modern technology. Additionally, we'd expect to find numerous plesiosaur bones at the bottom of the loch, yet none have been discovered. The truth is that, apart from a few random sightings over the years, there's absolutely no evidence of anything in Loch Ness other than fish and a few thousand empty Irn-Bru bottles. But if it wasn't a plesiosaur, then what exactly did Wilson capture in his photo? In 1994, 60 years after the famous photo was taken, two men named David Martin and Alistair Boyd took it upon themselves to find out. What they discovered was stranger than most might expect. As members of a Loch Ness research team, Martin and Boyd were determined to prove once and for all whether the surgeon's photo was genuine. Boyd had even seen Nessie himself a few years earlier, and he was eager to know if Wilson had really captured the creature on film. The two had recently come across a newspaper article from 1975 that claimed the photo was actually part of a hoax. For reasons unknown, the article hadn't received much attention when it was published, but Martin and Boyd believed it was worth a closer look. This led to years of research, though they weren't exactly risking life and limb. They simply followed some leads which eventually brought them to an elderly Scottish man named Christian Spurling. When they asked Spurling if he knew anything about the photo, he quickly revealed that the supposed monster, the beloved Nessie image, was just a piece of wood mounted on a toy submarine. And how did Spurling know this? It was simple. He had built the model himself for his stepfather, who happened to be Marmaduke Wetherell. Wetherill had been deeply embarrassed by the hippo print incident and his treatment by the Daily Mail, which motivated him to seek revenge by convincing the press that a Loch Ness monster actually existed. After Sperling completed his model, his stepfather took it to Loch Ness, where he enlisted the help of his other son, Ian Wetherill. Once they ensured no one else was around, the conspirators captured a few photographs of Sperling's creation floating in the water. They then shared the photos with their friend, Surgeon Robert Wilson, believing that Wilson's reputable background would lend credibility to the authenticity of the image. The prank surpassed their wildest expectations. The press fell for it, and the rest became part of history. In more recent years, robotic submersibles, sonar technology, and drones have been deployed in the quest to find Nessie, but no one has yet provided concrete evidence of her existence. In 2019, researchers aimed to catalog all living species in the loch by extracting DNA from the water. Their findings revealed no signs of anything unusual, with only a large eel suggested as a potential explanation for the numerous sightings over the years. Despite the absence of hard evidence, Loch Ness continues to draw millions of visitors from around the world, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive creature. And while Nessie may not show herself, the dark, mysterious waters of Loch Ness still enchant and captivate people, just as they have for thousands of years. Now let's turn our attention to another legendary mystery that has captivated imaginations for centuries: the story of the Kraken. The creature that has been described as a monstrous sea beast capable of dragging ships and sailors down into the depths is known today through Norse mythology, sailors' tales, and ocean legends. But for hundreds of years, the Kraken was no mere bedtime story. To the seafarers of the past, the Kraken was as real and terrifying as the ocean itself, lurking in the dark waters of the North Atlantic, waiting to make itself known. The first accounts of the Kraken come to us from ancient texts and sailors' logbooks that describe encounters with what can only be described as a creature of nightmarish proportions. This wasn't just a big fish or a curious whale, but something altogether more sinister, something that could rise from the depths, twist its enormous tentacles around a ship, and drag it into oblivion. The early stories were full of vivid details, speaking of the creature's enormous size, its many arms, and its ability to create whirlpools to pull ships down. And unlike many mythical creatures, the Kraken had a sense of mystery and terror that was uniquely maritime, a fitting nightmare for those brave enough to venture out into the ocean's boundless unknown. Origins of the Kraken myth. Our understanding of the Kraken begins in the cold waters of Scandinavia. The name Kraken itself comes from the Norse word for an unhealthy or twisted animal, a fitting descriptor for a creature that was said to be the bane of sailors and fishermen alike. Norse mythology, which gave us tales of gods like Thor and creatures like the Midgard serpent, also gave rise to legends of the Kraken. While the mythological Midgard serpent encircled the world, the Kraken was believed to haunt specific regions, primarily around Norway and Iceland. It's not just the name. The Kraken embodies the very essence of fear the Norse people held for the ocean, a force as mysterious and untamable as the sea itself. By the 13th century, the Kraken had made its way into written records. The Icelandic sagas, collections of Norse historical and mythological tales, mention a monstrous sea creature with multiple limbs and an insatiable appetite. This beast, however, was no mere predator. According to the tales, the Kraken's hunger was so vast that it could devour whales and entire schools of fish, leaving empty seas in its wake. Sailors warned each other of certain ominous signs: fish fleeing an area en masse, sudden stillness in the water, or an unnatural calm that preceded the Kraken's arrival. Yet, for all its monstrous qualities, the Kraken was also something of a paradox. It was both destroyer and provider, feared but also revered. Fishermen believed that following in the creature's wake could lead to bountiful catches, as fish seemed to gather around the Kraken's domain. It was an odd, dangerous kind of respect that seafarers held for the beast, which hints at the close, often perilous relationship humans had with the ocean in those days. Now let's turn our attention to another eerie mystery that has captured imaginations for centuries, the legend of the Mary Celeste. This isn't your typical ghost story or tall tale, yet it possesses all the ingredients of a maritime enigma. A seemingly cursed vessel, a vanishing crew, and endless speculation about what could have happened on the open sea make the Mary Celeste one of the most infamous and enduring mysteries in nautical history. For over a century, people have been fascinated by the strange fate of this abandoned ship and the questions that have lingered since she was first discovered adrift. The story of the Mary Celeste begins in 1872 on a cold December day when the British ship Dei Gratia spotted a schooner drifting aimlessly in the North Atlantic, about 400 miles east of the Azores. Captain David Morehouse, commanding the Dei Gratia, immediately recognized the ship. It was the Mary Celeste, a vessel that had left New York City only a month earlier bound for Genoa, Italy. Captain Morehouse knew the ship's captain, Benjamin Briggs, personally, and was puzzled as to why the Mary Celeste would be off course and drifting. The Dei Gratia's crew boarded the vessel to investigate. What they found would spark countless theories, books, and speculation for years to come. The Mary Celeste was eerily deserted. The ship's lifeboat was missing, yet the cargo was intact, and personal belongings, including the crew's valuables, had been left behind. The last entry in the ship's log was dated 10 days before the Dei Gratia found her, showing nothing unusual about the voyage or the crew's condition. The ship itself was seaworthy and showed no signs of distress. There was about 3.5 feet of water in the bilge, which was unusual but not alarming. It was nothing that would have necessitated an emergency evacuation. In the captain's cabin, they found Captain Briggs's belongings, including his pipe and a sheathed sword, along with the ship's navigation instruments and papers. There was no sign of struggle, and nothing appeared to be missing, except the people. Captain Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew members had vanished without a trace, leaving their ship to drift alone. The discovery of the Mary Celeste immediately gripped the imagination of the public. Newspapers called it a ghost ship, and writers, reporters, and sailors began speculating wildly about what could have happened. The mystery of the Mary Celeste's empty decks led to a flurry of theories, each more mysterious and imaginative than the last. One of the earliest and most plausible theories was that the crew abandoned the ship after fearing an imminent explosion. The Mary Celeste's cargo consisted of 1,701 barrels of alcohol, highly flammable material that could explain the panic. Some have speculated that fumes from the alcohol may have leaked, creating a threat of explosion. A frightening but brief phenomenon known as a cold explosion could have caused a temporary fire or burst of pressure, which might have terrified the crew into abandoning the ship. However, this theory has a flaw. None of the barrels had exploded, and the Dei Gratia's crew reported no signs of burning or scorching on board. Other theorists turned to natural disasters, suggesting a rogue wave or waterspout may have caused a momentary panic. A powerful wave could have washed over the deck, carrying away some of the crew or creating the illusion that the ship was sinking. In a rush to abandon ship, the entire crew might have crammed into the lifeboat, only to be swept away by the sea, leaving the Mary Celeste adrift. However, the ship's state of order and the personal belongings left behind seem inconsistent with a sudden, desperate evacuation. Then there's the theory of piracy, though it quickly falls apart. Pirates rarely leave valuable cargo intact. The Mary Celeste's cargo was undisturbed, as were personal effects of considerable value. Pirates also typically leave signs of violence or struggle behind. The untouched cargo and orderly state of the ship suggest that piracy was unlikely. Some even speculate about a supernatural explanation, with theories about ghostly apparitions or sea monsters emerging to claim the crew. The idea of the Mary Celeste as a haunted ship, cursed and stalked by the unknown, has persisted, fed by the lack of answers and the ghostly silence surrounding the case. These theories are, of course, grounded more in the imagination than in reality, but the mysterious nature of the case invites such speculation. Another possible explanation is more personal: mutiny. Some suggest that the crew turned on Captain Briggs or perhaps disagreed over the dangerous nature of their cargo. However, those who knew Captain Briggs described him as an experienced and steady leader who commanded respect. There's no documented history of conflict among the crew, and without any signs of violence on board, mutiny seems unlikely. The last log entry made on the Mary Celeste adds an additional layer of mystery. Dated November the 25th, 1872, it documented the ship's position as near the Azores Islands, but nothing unusual was recorded. This entry suggested everything was proceeding as expected, with no indication of trouble on board. Given that the ship was found days later, closer to Europe than the Azores, it's unclear what might have prompted the crew to abandon ship without leaving a note, a signal, or even a clue as to why they'd chosen to leave. Investigators and historians have often revisited that last entry, hoping for a hint, some cryptic clue in the words. Yet the logs remain stubbornly mundane, providing no insights into what happened in the final hours aboard the ship. The Mary Celeste was eventually brought to Gibraltar, where the British Admiralty held an inquest into what might have happened. Despite extensive questioning, inspections, and expert testimonies, the inquiry concluded without a clear answer. The Mary Celeste was eventually sold and returned to sea under different owners, but she never quite escaped her ghostly reputation. She went through several captains and many voyages, each marked by bad luck and strange misfortunes. After years of unlucky ventures, the Mary Celeste met her final fate when her last captain intentionally wrecked her off the coast of Haiti in an attempt to collect insurance money. The ship that had once drifted eerily through the Atlantic had become more trouble than she was worth. So, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed watching it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this.